All right, welcome to What's in a Game, the podcast where we are currently in the eye of the off-season hurricane. I'm here with my co-host Will Jones, and today we have a special guest to talk about the draft, CTFazio. How are you doing today, CT?
Hey everyone, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Been watching the show since you guys launched, and it's been great. So great to talk draft and Nuggets with you guys today.
Yeah, I'm so
Awesome.
excited to have you, man. We need
Appreciate
your
it.
expertise. It's draft time. I'm getting nervous.
I'm
I'll
nervous
try
about
my best.
everything. Yes, I'm nervous about everything. We've gotten a couple of big news items to sort of get the off-season ball rolling over the last couple of days, and it kind of started with the Lakers finally hiring JJ Redick as their head coach. But then like within, I don't know, an hour or so, we found out that a major trade happened between the Chicago Bulls and the Oklahoma City Thunder, and they sent Alex Caruso to Oklahoma City for Josh Giddey straight up. CT, I have to get your immediate reaction to this trade because I was beside myself in the Trader Joe's parking lot when I saw that news.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a lopsided deal. If you look at it from the OKC perspective, they add another really good perimeter defender, next to Shea and next to Jalen Williams, and I think it's going to be a really seamless fit for them. I actually don't think that it addresses like their main needs, which is probably like a bigger wing defender, even though I think Caruso can guard some wings in spots, but um, definitely a great trade. And Giddey was a guy in the playoffs who was like borderline unplayable from what I watched. So it's definitely a great trade for OKC. And then, the Bulls and Carter Silvis. I mean, I don't know what else to say anymore. I think just his claim to fame is speaking with Jokic pre-draft at this point.
I know.
Yeah.
I was worried when we lost him too to Denver. I was like, is this going to be bad for us? But I'm not regretting it right now.
Yeah.
So, Will, we talked a bit on our last episode about the issues with, the Nuggets' lack of ball handling and how that was compounded by Jamal's health problems in the playoffs, in particular, facing the point of attack defense of the Minnesota Timberwolves. I agree with CT that they haven't addressed their main deficiencies, particularly with their size in the front court, and the Mav series to me revealed deficiencies with their offense having not enough like athletic slashers, really. But there's no doubt that Alex Caruso is a top notch point of attack defender added to a team that already has Lou Dort, Shea Gildas Alexander, Cason Wallace, and Jalen Williams on that team. What do you think this means for how the Nuggets match up with the Oklahoma City Thunder?
I mean, it doesn't make it any easier,
Yeah.
but unless they do something, like they still need to add that additional piece to address the size of the front court. Like they're so close to, really presenting problems throughout the West. I mean, Caruso, maybe people are thinking he's on the down low because he's been on the Bulls kind of stashed away, but he's definitely like gonna surprise people again. He's gonna be effective, but I still think the Thunder are really young and they haven't had to go through too many like tough schemes yet in the playoffs. They've only had one series, but that's better than a lot of young players are getting. Like Chet and them already have playoff experience under their belt. They won a series. So I'm definitely not feeling great, but I still
Yeah.
would take Jokic over. He's going to have a
Yeah.
huge advantage in that matchup, at least currently how they're sitting.
Yeah. And we talked a bit before the playoffs started about what it means for a series to be easier for your best player versus your role players and your second star. We kind of saw in the Wolves series, it wasn't easy for anybody. So I don't know if we were able to take anything away from that. Another thing that happened was we started getting a couple of reports of extensions that are done and those that are in the works, right? Pascal Siakam signed his max deal with the Indiana Pacers, and Malik Monk signed a 4-year, $78 million extension with the Sacramento Kings. He's a player that a lot of people thought would be entering free agency and would be highly sought after, at that shooting guard position. I wanted to know, what do you think the fact that these players signed their extension so early, like well in advance of when they had to, opt out of their player options, well in advance, obviously, of free agency, but just deciding to stay with the teams that they're in and not sort of dragging things along to maybe increase their leverage, like maybe would have been done in past off seasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, like kind of just getting the guarantee at that, early on in the process, I think is important. And especially now that they kind of changed the rules, right? You could, agree to an extension before free agency like technically starts. So I think that's why we saw like Malik Monk got his deal. Now we're seeing like a couple trades even after the finals as well. So I think teams just kind of want to get their stuff done early. And then I think too, like the draft being 2 days, I think that's going to be
Yeah.
a factor
Yeah.
as well. We're going to see some trades maybe be split up, depending on, promises. I'm sure we'll get more into that, but I think that's probably more of a factor there as well. But I kind of just think teams are prioritizing, their like personal free agents now, and then maybe they'll, see what else they could, kind of, factor in once July 1st hits. But I'm waiting for the KCP extension. Where is that at?
I know, right? It's one of the things with Malik Monk's extension coming out is I thought that they would either get similar money or maybe Monk would get a little bit more because he's kind of seen as that like has more offensive punch player, even though KCP brings it to a completely different level on the defensive end. What do you
Mhm.
make of the fact that what does either of you make of the fact that OG Anunoby has yet to sign his extension with the Knicks yet?
I mean, he was newer to the Knicks, so it was no guarantee that he was going to necessarily just extend right away after that trade.
Especially
Um,
if he apparently doesn't like whatever number they put in front of him. Unlike Pascal, who Indiana just basically gave him as much as they could, right? They gave him the full 4-year max deal, and OG's
yeah.
probably not getting that from the Knicks, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those situations where you trade for him hoping that you have like a good insight on where he fits and how he feels about the team, and you're like hoping he comes back. I don't know. I mean, the Knicks, they're kind of turning a corner for being, consistently making the playoffs and not being as clowned upon as normal. But CT, you're out there in that area a bit. What do you think about OG?
I am. Yeah, no, I think, I mean, OG is a very important piece to what they do. Especially factoring, having versatile defenders around Brunson, I think is a big plus to what they do. I'd be surprised if he leaves the Knicks just because of the CAA kind of connections. And
I
I
mean,
think he's still with
his
CAA.
agent
Is
is
he or is
Leon
he?
Rose's son.
Whoa.
Oh, is he really? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the dots are aligning there. So like I said, I'd be shocked if he left. I think he's going to get a pretty sizable deal from them, and I think he deserves it. I think OG's a really good player. Albeit I think probably like is a little bit overvalued in the grand scheme of things, but I do think someone with his skill set, being a versatile defender, good shooter, slasher, athlete, can't
Can
really have
kinda
too many.
take over and be, like, a primary option in some limited units.
Yeah,
Tibbs
definitely.
had him, like, trying to carry some really rough units offensively in the playoffs this year, and he was
He was fighting for his life out there.
doing his best, yeah. Okay, so the last piece of off-season stuff I wanted to touch on before we get into the draft was some of the early reports of players that were going to either opt in or opt out of their player options. And I say early because there's still over a week before most player option deadlines. Drew Eubanks and Eric Gordon of the Suns are reportedly going to be opting out of their player options for next year. They were on 2-year vet minimums for Phoenix. They were lured to Phoenix with longer vet minimum deals than most teams would offer for salary cap rule purposes. Malik Beasley is reportedly not coming back to the Bucks, and I guess you could. It's a little more ambiguous what the situation is there because of the way that it was reported that he just won't be returning. It's not like he's choosing to opt out. Like, so we don't know which side that was coming from. And then Torrey Craig is also going to be becoming a free agent by opting out of his player option with the Bulls. On the flip side, I saw really it was just Damian Lee so far has opted in to stay with the Phoenix Suns next year. Kind of makes sense. He had a meniscus injury this past season, just wants to lock in the money and have that security because he's probably not going to have too much of a market in free agency. But do any of those names stand out to you as either you're surprised that they're leaving Phoenix, you're surprised that they might do you think that they could get more than a minimum on free agency, in free agency, in a couple of weeks? Or, um, do you think that they're maybe playing a bit of roulette by not taking the guaranteed money?
I think probably, I think they're gonna probably be minimum guys, all of
All of
them.
them?
I mean
Yeah.
I mean, Beasley at this point, I mean, his value seems to have really tanked. I mean, after remember the offseason hype for the Bucks, they're like, Malik Beasley's gonna be this defensive stopper, and,
No one
us
actually
Nuggets fans have
believed
seen that.
that.
Yeah, I mean, other than the delusional Bucks people, but, uh we saw that movie before with Beasley on the Nuggets where, he was still young in his career, but he wasn't really a defender,
Yeah.
at that point. But yeah, I mean, I probably think all those guys are going to get minimum, so maybe slightly above the minimum. I mean, Torrey Craig probably is a minimum guy. I've always been a pretty big fan of Torrey. Ever since him being on the Nuggets, I think he's got a pretty intriguing kind of route to how he's gotten to where he is today. So, but yeah, I'd be shocked if they get like anything like slightly above the minimum.
Will,
Yeah.
I know you had some thoughts on Malik Beasley. Did you want to share those?
I know. I'm like, he is like, I was like, why does anyone want him anymore? Like, I get that he's not going to be out of the league. He had a very good shooting season last season, as Grace reminded me. She was quick to remind me about his spot up shooting. But I just remember, like CT is saying, there was the social media post with the Bucks theoretical starting roster with Malik in there, and everyone was kind of joking about that even before the season started. But it's just like it's not a good fit next to Dame because they're both kind of like defensive holes. They can have explosive shooting from three, but like you don't need him next to Dame. That said, I still like, I mean, I remember when he was on the Lakers and he couldn't even get on the floor. The Lakers are pretty desperate for people right now, and they didn't even want to keep Malik Beasley. So but that could have been like their own fault. Like, I don't know, role players just disappear when they play with LeBron, or like, they had all these coaching issues. So, yeah, that's all I have on Malik Beasley. I don't really believe in him, but we'll see. Uh,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, since we're done with that, all of the off-season slop for the day, the last couple of days, we can get into our full introduction of our lovely guest, CT. Will, why don't you take it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure anyone who's watching this show probably knows you because we have so many Nuggets fans. But for anyone who maybe hasn't seen you, but even those who do know you, maybe they don't know this, but did you recently get a promotion on your middle school basketball team? Is that where you coach, middle school?
I do. Yes, I coach middle school basketball. So it's my first year last year. During the 2023-24 season was my first year coaching my alma mater actually in Jersey. So I coached the middle school team there, varsity boys, seventh and eighth grade team. So I
Nice.
started as an assistant, and then the head coach that I worked with, he works at the school as well. I don't work at the school, but he's going to go to high school level now, so he's kind of like going up a level. So I'm going to take over as head coach next year. So
Nice.
looking forward to that. Should be a cool opportunity. So got to start somewhere.
Congrats, man. That's
Thank
really
you. No, I
cool.
appreciate it. Thank you.
I have to
Thank
ask
you.
you, as a middle school coach, what are like the priority like skills that you really have to like start working on with kids that young?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So I've actually been running a lot of clinics lately with the impending seventh and eighth graders, and then actually running a clinic with some of the eighth graders going into high school as well that I coach this year. Just trying to get them prepped for like summer ball. Some of them are playing like summer high school ball just to get kind of acclimated before they start their freshman year. I think we have one kid as well. I think he's going to play JV. That's how he was really good. He's like a big man, 6'3"
Oh,
already for
whoa.
like eighth grade, which he's pretty tall. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think the priority usually for now is more like skill development. So we do a lot of ball handling drills. We do a lot of shooting, defensive drills as well, like 3-on-2, 2-on-1. So just trying to get like the players to be up and down, and it's more like an introduction and like trying to teach them the game. And then like after that, we did put in like some schemes this year. So like a 2-3 zone, a
Ooh.
1-3-1. I actually did run a couple plays that I kind of copied off of Malone this year. Like like Jokic has like a little bit of like a brush screen like to get a post up. It's like
Yeah.
nothing complicated. It's like a one kind of action play.
Yeah,
And like
their
some
intro play in every game. Really?
Yeah, that's usually like the first play of every game, so it's like kind of easy to mimic there. And like some horn stuff as well, which I don't think it's
Mhm.
like too over the top. It's like a one, like usually just like a one hitter play. But yeah, just try to teach a little bit of the scheme, but mainly like skill development work, shooting, ball handling, defense, things like
Nice. I could have used that because I don't remember anything from high school basketball. I was like, did they even
that.
teach us like any schemes? What's going on? But all right, let's shift a bit over to the Nuggets. So I don't even think I necessarily know this, but how did you become a Nuggets fan?
Yeah, no, I think I've said this on I think Blackburn asked me like 2 years ago when I did his pod. He was like, "How'd you become a Nuggets fan from New Jersey?" And I actually in New Jersey there's a couple Nuggets people that I even know. Like some of them are my friends, but some are like people that I've met that are Nuggets fans. I don't know, maybe the East Coast has some Nuggets fans, but whenever I go to the Nets games or the Garden, I do see a decent amount of Nuggets jerseys there. But I actually started being a
Interesting.
Nuggets fan when Carmelo was on the team. So those years with Carmelo, Allen Iverson, Chauncey Billups, Kenya Martin, Birdman, all those guys. They were just like fun teams to watch. They couldn't beat the Lakers, unfortunately, but did put
Yeah.
up some nice battles with them. And Kobe always was, the Nuggets killer basically at that time. But yeah, Melo was like my favorite player growing up.
Did they
And then
not have
after
wing
that,
defenders back then either?
they had some. J.R. Smith was on the team at that point. So, I mean, he was a pretty good defender. Who else? Anthony Carter, I think, was on the team. Funny enough, his son is actually in the draft this year, Devin Carter.
Oh,
Um,
okay. That's that
yeah,
Carter.
yep, that's that Carter. So yeah, no, I started being a Nuggets fan just because I like Melo, and then at that point, Melo got traded, and my friend at the time was like, "You can't become a Knicks fan now because you'll be a front runner," which was pretty funny because the Knicks just didn't really accomplish that
Yeah,
much. Um,
true.
so, but
Knicks
that
fans
was
have gotten
basically
to
how I
be underdogs for a really long time.
definitely. Definitely. So that's how I started being a Nuggets fan, and then yeah, I just stuck with the Nuggets ever since. Going from Melo and then to the Gallinari years and Fareed and those guys. They were fun teams. We kind of knew that they weren't really like contender type teams, but you know, I think for me, like basketball is more than just like watching a contender. Obviously, I think we're spoiled with Jokic now, but I just like watching the game, and those teams were fun. And then obviously after that, I really got more into the draft when the Nuggets started to rebuild. Which I'm sure we'll get to, after that. But yeah, that's how I became a Nuggets fan. So Melo was like my main kind of, reasoning for being a Nuggets fan. And then, obviously that kind of went south, but I still respect Melo to this day. I hope he gets his jersey retired eventually, but I know that's an unpopular take amongst Nuggets Twitter, but,
Right.
um, hopefully they can kind of squash that, down the line.
I love that we have two Nuggets fans here that are, not in Colorado, not from Colorado,
Yeah.
who like just gravitated to the Nuggets. It makes me feel very validated that there's some kind of like inherent fun, pure hoop quality to them. Because you didn't even jump ship when Melo came to the Knicks. Like you were just
Right.
still on it. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
No, definitely. Yeah. I think a lot of people would have jumped ship at that point, but I don't know. I just wanted to stay with the team and, see how they did. But, it's cool to be a fan all these years later.
Yeah.
So, CT, you have been my go-to expert on the draft ever since last off season, really, because I decided to follow the team more closely. I wanted to know everything. I was like, oh my gosh, Calvin Booth, he got more draft picks. Who's he going to get? All this stuff. I wanted to know, how did you first get into this, scouting prospects as this sort of side thing that you do? And like, what do you enjoy the most about it?
Yeah, no, I think for me, I started in the year of 2000. It's a while now. 2013 was my first draft. So that was the Giannis draft. Oladipo as well. I think Gobert was in that class as well. Blackburn and I spoke about that last night. I think he was like talking about like comparison like from 2013 to this current draft. But 2013 was my first draft that I like sort of paid attention to it. I didn't do like a big board or any kind of like evaluation really then. I actually remember like one night I was just like sick. I was in high school and I was like sick and I was watching the
Mm,
draft and I was like, this is pretty cool like to watch. And I've always liked college basketball too, just from like the perspective of just like watching it as a viewer. And then it kind of I really gravitated to it because I like seeing the progression really from like how you go from
mm,
college or overseas. But also like I'd say the main driver for me to become a draft um, kind of person like that I like doing big boards on a yearly basis and like doing evaluation was I don't know if you remember this, Will, you might remember. Do you remember Draft Express? Like John Gavoni, right?
Yeah, yeah,
On
yeah.
Twitter. So back then, him and Mike Schmitz, who works in the front office for Portland now, and he used to be an ESPN analyst. They used to do Draft Express videos on YouTube. I don't know if you remember, and they used to do strength and weakness videos. And I thought those were like the coolest thing ever because you would see like the strength videos where you would see the prospect and they'd look like they were like
League
LeBron level
MVP
prospect.
caliber. Like that's the
Yeah,
website.
league MVP. So you would see all of their highlights, right? And then if you look at the weaknesses and you're like, oh, this is the worst player to ever play the game,
It's
basically.
not gonna
Just
make it in
so
So
this league.
extreme on
Yeah.
both sides.
yeah, definitely. So I kind of like that. I think they were like the main kind of drivers, especially for like quote unquote draft Twitter nowadays. They really were like the pioneers for that. So they were kind of like big drivers for me as far as like gravitating to the draft and kind of paying attention to it on a yearly basis. So just for me, I kind of like the progression, seeing players go from college, overseas, and then kind of translating to the NBA. And I like the evaluation period of like, especially now, like that I've been doing it for so long, probably since 2014 around there. So like Jokic was like the first draft that I really kind of like evaluated the class, in depth. Obviously I was in high school still, so it wasn't like I like now where I kind of have I feel like I have a good knowledge base, but just kind of like I said, seeing that progression from there to now and like seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, how the league
Yeah.
kind of changes over the period of time, from like the Warriors to Jokic now and the Celtics obviously. I think that's kind of cool to follow and it's interesting as well. It keeps you thinking. So, yeah, that's how I got into doing draft coverage.
Yeah, and you have, obviously started taking a much more, I guess, rigorous analytical approach to this. Like you said, you're making
Yes.
your own big board, like just kind of evaluating raw talent, and then also doing these mock drafts where you're trying to figure out like what team wants what and for what purposes as well. And you've learned a lot about it throughout the years. You've just gotten better at it. Who are some of your favorite hits of maybe since you've started doing this in 2014? And who was your biggest miss? You're like, wow, I was just so wrong about that guy in either direction.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I've actually never been asked this before. So I'd say my biggest draft hits, like comparative to where they were drafted, Gary Harris was my first hit.
Mm.
I'd say like my real hit. He went at 19 in the class, so he kind of slid down the board a bit from where he was and kind of projected to go. I actually made a list for this. So Gary Harris, Josh Richardson was another one.
Mm-hmm.
I was really high on Josh Richardson. He went in the second round. I forget which year it was, 2015, 16, around there. Jordan Clarkson was another hit that I had. I was watching him at Mizzou a lot, and I kind of thought that he'd be a good point guard in the league. Let me see who else here. Delon Wright was another one at Utah. Another guy
Oh,
who was like an
Delon
older
Wright's one of your
prospect.
guys. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully it comes full circle if we sign him this summer. And then Nick Claxton was another one. And then I'd say CB as well, Christian Brown. I'd say he's
Yeah.
probably another one of my hits. I was pretty high on him for the Nuggets going back 2 years ago. And then my misses, it gets pretty rough here. Killian Hayes had a top 3 grade on
Oof.
back in that
Top
class.
You're not the only one.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, a lot of draft Twitter had Killian at 1. At that
Yeah.
point, I couldn't get there, but I did have him in my top 3, which obviously doesn't look good now. Chris Dunn had pretty high as well.
Okay.
Again, he like is in the league now. I mean, I'd consider him. I wouldn't. It's tough to consider him a bust because he's in the league now in like a rotation. But I mean, relative to where he was selected as a top 5 guy, I could say he's a bust. I'd admit. Justice Winslow is another one. I was high on Winslow going back in that class. And then it gets pretty rough here. James McKnight was another one I was kind of high on. I had him like lottery-ish. And then Poku was another guy I was high on. Top 7, I had a grade on him. That
So was Presty.
not a good.
So
Yeah.
I
So at
thought,
least, I could kind of share that in common at least. One of the good GMs had him high, and we both whiffed there. And then Johnny Davis, another one recently who it's not looking too good for Johnny right now. So he was another one of my misses. So those are some of the
Nice.
players I had listed out there.
and soon you'll put Straw there on your hit list.
Hey, fingers crossed.
Yeah, still to be determined.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't watch a ton of college basketball. Like, I'm definitely more into NBA, but like, I have friends who love Gonzaga, so I'll watch them, and that's why I've always been like, just draft, Hunter Saul is like Straw there, and like when I see
Yeah.
you like hyping him up, I'm like, yeah, the Gonzaga guys, just bring them in.
Yeah. No, Salas was really good this year.
Yeah,
I'm actually
shame.
was surprised that he went back. But yeah, no, he took a really good leap. I
Especially
know he
in
just left
this
Gonzaga,
draft, I'm
but
like, Salas, you would have been a first rounder pretty easily, I think, especially after like 100 people withdrew looking at the
yeah,
current class. I just feel like he would have been a definite first round. Because I think I like
100%. I had
him
a
more
first
than
round grade on
Jalen
him.
Tyson. And Jalen Tyson is getting consistently mocked in the first round now. And
Mhm.
they kind of like similar archetype, right?
Yeah,
Anyway, moving.
I'd say Salas is more of like a combo guard. Like he can play on and off the ball. Tyson, he's more of like wingish for me. I think Salas though, like he could be a two-way guy in the league as far as like two-way player. His defense
Yeah.
is really good. Yeah, I was mad that he went back because I want him for
Yeah.
Denver,
Yeah,
28. So
for
hopefully
sure.
next year.
Okay, so we want to before we get into your thoughts on this current draft and what the Nuggets should do, I wanted to take a little bit of a walk through time and evaluate what the Nuggets have done in the draft up until this point so that we can understand maybe what their thinking is going to be and what lessons they may or may not choose to learn this summer. Will, why don't you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about the Nuggets' past draft history?
Right. So obviously you have the guys like the Jokic, Jamal, the people from that era. A lot of them are gone because we've had to trade them, like the Montaigne, Will Barton, Gary Harris, those guys. Right now we're in this mode. Thankfully, we won a championship already, but we had Tim Connelly. Calvin Booth comes in. We'll talk more about Calvin Booth's specific style in a bit, but Tim Connelly left before he could see his vision fulfilled. We had MPJ. He was in the GM role when we traded for Aaron Gordon. How would you grade Tim Connelly when he was on the Nuggets in regards to his whole draft history, and what was his approach to building around Jokic and anything that kind of set a runway for Booth?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting question. With Conley, I think he obviously had the hit with Jokic, and that kind of changed the trajectory of the franchise because once you have your hit with your guy, you know what I mean, like a franchise talent, then it's kind of easier. I think. I mean, it's a difficult challenge, but it's easier to say like we have our guy now, and we're gonna build accordingly around that. So I would say Connolly, in the grand scheme of things for the Nuggets, he was a like a really good GM. I would say. I think early on, some of the trades he made were a bit questionable, like the Gobert trade, like his literal first move on the job. Like he traded Gobert, which I mean, he didn't know it was Gobert. It was like the 27th pick, I believe, in that class. So he traded the 27th pick for Eric Green and Cash, which looking back on it now, I
Mm,
mean, it's not a good deal at all.
mm,
Yeah. Grace is like, who's that? He went to
exactly.
Virginia Tech like a while ago, but yeah, he played overseas for a while. Um, and then obviously, I think the two big knocks you could put on Connolly, I think, was, I mean, the Gobert trade. I wouldn't say specifically was like a, it was a bad move because he traded a first rounder to trade back like into the draft, and then the Tyler Lydon draft was detrimental. Like I think that was a really, really like detrimental move in the grand scheme of things for the Nuggets because if you look at it now, like I think Gordon, of course, is a great Nugget, and they wouldn't have won the championship without him. But you could add OG Anunoby in that class, at 13. And pairing, him. If you look at it, obviously in hindsight, right? If you have OG and MPJ as your front court, I think that's really really dynamic, right? And then obviously. He traded back and for Trey Lyles and Tyler Lydon, who like was in the league for like 2 years, I think.
That one
So
killed me.
yeah, I mean that was for me like that draft was like really really like bad, and I don't think a lot of people really like take the time to actually think about of like how like that almost set the course of like the Nuggets like really far behind for a bit. But yeah, no, I think Connolly, especially his draft picks, were really good in the grand scheme of things. You look at MPJ, which was obviously an injury risk. Jamal Murray was at 7. Obviously Buddy Hield went before him and done too, so he kind of had some luck there. Jokic at 41, which was obviously a great pick.
He was the
And then
third
if you
pick
look
in
at
that draft class though, for the Nuggets.
yeah, no, he was because then that trade that was also a great trade as well. Gary Harris, Yusuf Nurkic for Doug McDermott. I mean, that's a fantastic deal that you got two starting level players at that time. Obviously, then Gary kind of tailed off after a bit, but at that time he was a pretty high level starter for Doug McDermott, who's like a bench guy, right? So another great trade. And then Bones as well. I think the book's still kind of out on Bones. Like he's borderline rotation, I would say. And then that draft for 2020 or 2021 with the Zeke Najee draft. Not a good draft. He passed on Desmond Bain, passed on Jaden McDaniels. There was a lot of guys that he passed on that I thought were going to be better fits for the Nuggets. And luckily, he was able to swindle the Magic front office to take R.J. Hampton and Gary Harris and
Right.
Aaron Gordon, which made up for it.
I just
And
had a
then I
quick
think, obviously
question.
Flacco, rotation guy as well.
I just had a quick
Like Juancho's
question
out of the league now too, but yeah, sure.
about the OG Anunoby draft, the 2017 draft. Was that a draft night trade when he traded back, or was it earlier?
No, I think that was a draft night trade because
Was
I
it like
think what
in
had
the middle of?
happened
Yeah.
was the Nuggets traded on draft night for Gary Harris and Nurkic that 2014. And I think that was like 2 or 3 years later. What draft was that with OG? 2016 maybe?
17.
2017. So it was like 3 years later, and I think Connelly tried to like do it again. Like he thought that he could kind of replicate the same deal,
Yeah.
which obviously is it's tough sledding and kind of doing that. So
I was just looking at the
yeah,
draft
I
class and
think
I'm like, this is a really good draft class. Like, I just wouldn't want to. I would just want my pick of like 7 guys. I thought it was like, okay, maybe it's a situation where the top 10 are great. You get to draft night, you get to your pick, and you're like, okay, our guy's gone, so let's move
mhm.
back. But there were still like a lot of good NBA players there, even like not just OG. Jared Allen was in that draft. Kyle Kuzma was in that draft. John Collins was in that draft. Just like solid
Yeah,
NBA players that were better than Tyler Lydon because Derek White. I mean, there's
yeah, another one.
it's tough.
Yeah, no, that was tough because of who we picked in Tyler Lydon and Trey Lyles is more like a rotation, like back end rotation guy, but like he had Donovan Mitchell too. You know what I mean? Like Donovan Mitchell was drafted and traded, and then he also passed on OG Anunoby. So it was like a double whammy there, where it was just like I said, that draft and I think 2020 with the Zeke Najee draft also are pretty detrimental drafts for the Nuggets. And again, if you have Jokic, you have to get a lot of it right. And I think I think overall in the grand scheme of things, he was a good GM, but there were flaws that he had, like the Facu signing, things like that, where he didn't
Mm-hmm.
prioritize wing
Mm-hmm.
defenders in the Jokic
Mhm.
era. I
Yeah, that's
thought,
what I was
once
gonna
Grant
ask.
left, he added Gordon, but like after that, it was like really, really tough. Like actually, me and a couple of the Nuggets Twitter people came up with a wing list at the point, like of just any like wing that was available that we thought like to add to the
Pick
team. Like
anyone.
that's how dire. I'm sure Will remembers. Like that's how dire it was for the
Yeah.
Nuggets. Like they had no wings at all.
Yeah, we were
And again
just
with Jokic, like you have to have that. So
yeah, we were talking last episode where now it's like we're looking for these ball handlers in some senses,
yeah,
and we didn't have wings, but I definitely don't miss the days where it was like Monty and Facu and Austin Rivers and just like all these
Bones.
small players, and we didn't have any wings. So, yeah, and then like Connelly, yeah, it was a lot of some mistakes in drafts and trades, and then trying to make trades to like make up for those. And
Mm.
hopefully, I mean, we're getting some of that like with Zeke a little bit now, where we're trying to fix that. So it's gonna be interesting.
I forgot that he picked Moutier as well. That's another one.
Oh yeah,
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, like, are we just forgiving that one? Was the pick bad, or like was Moutier just like totally different from like how everyone was scouting him to what he ended up being in the NBA?
Yeah, no, I think Moutier was a really hyped up prospect, at that point. He played in China. He's committed to SMU beforehand, and then I think he has some sort of eligibility issue that he had to go to China. But yeah, I think Moutier just for him, even Malone has said it actually like later down the line, he gave him too much free reign. Murray came off the bench, Jokic came off the bench. Moutier got a starting spot immediately, and I think that kind of killed his development. But
mm,
also too, I just think that some of the some of his skill set also just wasn't really
yeah.
translatable to modern kind of ball. You know what I mean? He wasn't really a good shooter. Decision making was not good, and defense he had the physical traits, but he just wasn't really that great on that end.
So Malone's having like flashbacks to Moutier when he's like worried about playing these dudes.
Nobody's
That might be
starting
it.
though. Yeah. Okay, so that was kind of the general overview of Tim Conley's tenure as GM and kind of steward of the Nuggets draft picks while he was here. We only have 2 drafts so far as the sample size for Calvin Booth and how his front office is approaching the draft, and we have some statements from him the last couple of years as well. But like in your own words, how would you describe Calvin Booth's and the current front office's philosophy to the draft, and like what are they looking for in players when they go into the draft, and how do you think they've done at like executing on that plan that is, yeah, just meeting that stated goal?
Yeah, no, I think too, just to circle back to Connelly a little bit, I do have to give him credit for,
Mm,
he had, a hand in putting in the core four, trading for Gordon, Murray, Jokic, of course, was obviously, you could say, was a luck pick, but he did pick him, like at 41, like that's, I gotta say it's a little bit lucky, but
Yeah.
it, he identified him and he picked him. So I have to give him credit there. And then MPJ was a huge injury risk at that point. I don't know if you remember, like he was like medically like red flagged, like do not draft this guy. And he took the chance on him because he saw Jokic, and you kind of had like a little bit of leeway there, and it paid off because they won a championship. So I do have to give Connelly credit there that he assembled four of the starters that won a championship, and then obviously Monte as well, and he traded for Barton. So I will say, like, he was overall a great GM. He did have flaws, but he overall
Mhm.
there was a lot worse. There's a lot worse. Just look at the rest of the league at this point.
Yeah.
look
Um,
at
It's hard to get to that core four.
Chicago and Detroit.
You're gonna make
yeah,
mistakes. Like and Booth comes in and he's like building around the fringes, and everyone's like, Booth's amazing. Like he's doing fine, and you can go into that, but like it's definitely harder
yeah.
to do
Yeah.
that.
Well, I mean, people are
No,
also like,
definitely.
I'm done with Calvin Booth, all of this stuff. But like we talked it
I've
on
seen
our
that a
last
lot lately.
episode with Zamora about like what is the role of a GM on a contender, and it's like their job is to give you a roster that has a chance, a real
Mhm.
chance at contention. What percent chance that is that they have to meet to say like they did their job, you know, probably varies depending on the fan that you ask and the given day and how good your superstar is, right? Because we just wanted to win championships every year. But I think it is important to keep that perspective that like they can't literally give you everything. They can just give you a chance. But
Right.
are they doing their best job to, achieve that?
Yeah, no, I think with Booth, I lauded him a lot his first year as far as his moves on the margins. I think his first year on the job, and especially that offseason, like the Nuggets were kind of in flux, if you remember. Like Connelly had left, and they're coming off a series where obviously they didn't have MPJ and Murray, and a lot of people were just calling Jokic a fraud and everything like that. And if you just looked at the surrounding roster next to Jokic, like it was pretty dire. And Booth really cleaned out a lot of the roster. He traded Monte and Barton for KCP, which was a swindle trade if you really look at it. And then he extended him as well. He extended KCP for the
Yeah.
next year. Going into this
Wish
year,
it was like
obviously
one
they
more
didn't win
year,
it, but
but
right, right. But at least he had
yeah.
that kind of security, going into it. And then he drafted Christian Brown, and he drafted Peyton Watson as well. And then he signed Bruce Brown, which I think I did. I don't know if you had a chance to check out my article that I wrote about like after the Nuggets season. I did kind of say that Bruce Brown was more of a lucky signing
Yeah.
and malpractice by the league,
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
league
That's how
just
I
not
look at
signing
it
That's
Bruce
really
too.
what
Brown
it
When I'm
was.
trying, we're like, how
insane.
do we replace Bruce Brown? It's like, well, actually, it would take some serious malpractice and like serious swindling potentially to like just
Right,
replace Bruce Brown in actuality.
definitely. Definitely, for sure. And I think like for Booth, I have to give him credit because he identified a need and he signed Bruce and he played him and he basically like Malone and him used him as a guard. In Brooklyn he was used as like a backup, big almost as a roller. And at the Nuggets, he was used as a point guard basically, and you could do that with Jokic. I think he's unique in that aspect, but Bruce was great. And if you look at Christian, he hit as a rookie and played in the finals game, which is unheard of for a 22nd pick.
Yeah.
If you
He
really
was
like look at the
like
history of the
very,
draft.
very impactful in a finals
Mhm.
game.
Do you think it might be more
Definitely, for
common
sure.
since it's like players, I don't know if they're more keyed into being a role player like that when you're coming in this young?
Yeah, no, I think especially where Christian was drafted, you're gonna find role players like that. Because if you really look at it too, like at the top of the draft, a lot of those teams are tanking. So you're not gonna
Mm,
get like a top three
right.
guy unless you're like a Tatum really with the Celtics, back then and Jalen Brown too, because I think they were like a playoff team at that point as well.
Right. Those were
Um,
Nets
but
picks
if
that they had though, right? From like a weren't those they the Nets picks from the KG trade? Like way back.
yeah,
Is that what
yeah,
that
I
was?
think that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we got Jamal from the
From
Mellow
the Knicks.
Knicks, so
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Definitely. And then as far as with Booth, I think like his first year was impeccable. You know what I mean? 10 out of 10, no complaints from me at all for what he did. And then I think, after the championship, it's a different set of circumstances, right? It's not the Nuggets were in flux and then he came in and he cleaned out the roster and he added wing defenders that Connelly didn't have prior. And that's why in Connelly's last years, I was pretty critical of his decision making. I didn't think he filled the roster with a lot of guys that were Jokic players and like we're able to like accentuate Jokic's strengths, but also cover for his weaknesses. And I think with Booth now, this last year, I think he leaned too far into the Project Dynasty aspect of it.
Mm.
I think Strawther was a fine pick. Adding him to the roster, I think that was a good move. I still have a belief in Julian. After his first year, even though numbers weren't great, but he was injured for a lot of it. I'm sure we'll get more into the draft in a second, but Pickett and Tyson giving them guaranteed multi-year deals as second-round guys, I think was pretty much an over slot for them. And also me being a draft guy, I wasn't particularly high on their skill sets as well, especially in Denver, but even just generally. So I think he did lean too far into the drafting strategy. And then if you look at the free agents that he had, it's kind of tough. Like we said, with the Bruce signing was a lucky signing. It was a fortunate signing, right? And if you look at like Reggie, that was like a handshake deal. From what I saw on the timeline, that like part of the buyout, like he had to come back basically because he was bought out and signed with the Nuggets. And then Holiday, for what his role was, I think he performed pretty well. You look at him in the
Yeah.
playoffs, but obviously I think you need a little bit better than Holiday. And then giving Zeke Naji the extension was obviously like the cherry on top to everything. So I think like as far as those moves were concerned, that's why the Nuggets flamed out in the playoffs. So I think you have to give Booth a slice of the blame. But I think and I see a lot of people now in the timeline are just like out on Calvin Booth and what is he doing and this and that. And it's like he helped win a championship in his first year. And yeah, the second year wasn't as great, but also too like the Nuggets are in a different set of circumstances where they're trying to repeat as champions with the second apron and with all these restrictions, right? So I think we could give him a little bit of leeway, but I do think this summer coming up is definitely a big summer for him.
We're definitely going to get to the blame pie in a bit. But before we do, I did want you to sort of elaborate a little bit and just put a fine point on how you see each of the actual draft picks that Cal has made to this point. I'll just like list them off and you can, I don't know, rank them or grade them A to F. Again, only 2 draft sample size. We have Christian Brown, Peyton
Yep.
Watson, Julian, Jalen Pickett, Hunter Tyson, and Ishmael Kamagate, whose draft rights now lie with the LA Clippers.
Yeah, no, I think Brown is a 10 out of 10 pick. I think at 22, getting a guy like him off the bench, who's a good wing defender, slasher. He was actually tabbed as like the best closeout defender in the class back when I was scouting him, and I think that was like a pretty specific point. But I do think it helps the Nuggets is like if you look at their defense before that, they didn't have really any wing guys to throw at teams, and for Christian to make an impact in the finals the way he did as like a 7th or 8th man, you couldn't ask for more for a guy, especially picked in after the lottery, right? So I would give Christian 10 out of 10. I do think he does have flaws, of course, but for what the Nuggets picked and adding him to the roster, like I think Christian was good in the playoffs this year too. I really do. Of course, the 3-pointer was kind of a little bit hit or miss, but for what he was able to contribute off the bench, I thought he was pretty good, and he was the best Anthony Edwards defender, which is something to watch, I think, moving forward. Peyton Watson is next, and I think I'm a little bit probably on the lower end with Watson, to be honest. I think that him and Brown have a lot of overlapping skills, which I think might be an issue moving forward. Playing off the bench together, I think it's probably a little less glaring when you have Jokic, Murray, and MPJ together, and they're sharing the court with the 3 starters. I think that's probably better, but Watson, he wasn't playable past the first round. I think maybe some of that was Malone's hesitancy there, but I do think it was a good move playing Holiday over him. But again, I think this year in the first round, I do like what I saw with Watson as far as like the regular season sample. He's going to have to improve the 3-ball, no doubt about it, in order to stay on the floor. But I mean, individual defensive, talent was top tier. Great as a rim protector, played as a dunker spot guy, showed a little bit of self-creation flashes as well. So I picked 30. I'd probably give it like an 8 out of 10. I mean, maybe a 9 even. I think
Right,
he's
because you
probably
don't normally
rotation
see
quality.
flyers taken that late, right?
Yeah, and
And that's what
especially
he
too if you
was.
look at it, yep, exactly. If you look at his UCLA sample, like he averaged like 3 points a game, and he barely played at UCLA, so that was a pretty big heater pick by Calvin, and I think for the most part, like it paid off this year in the regular season, but he's gonna have to be better in the playoffs in order for it to really kind of shine. So those were the two guys in that class. I think Kamagate we could just kind of write off,
Hmm.
that they kind of traded him, and that summer league performance was one of the most like miserable
It
I've
was
seen,
one of the
to
summer
be
league
honest.
performances of all time.
Yeah, one of the summer league performances. And then I think Strawther and you could give an incomplete too, even though I think the numbers were pretty bad. But Malone did play him a lot this year, like more than I thought he would. And I was pretty high on Strawther pre-draft, but I think this year coming up for him is going to be pretty big. But I give it an incomplete for now. I think it's too low of a sample to really kind of gauge it there. And then Pickett and Tyson, I mean, incomplete as well. But I know we've all kind of spoken on the timeline about it. I just am not a believer in those guys being Nuggets playoff returning guys. If you want my
Hmm.
honest opinion about it, I just don't think they'll return playoff equity, maybe even rotation equity, if you want me to be honest there as well. I just think the Nuggets have their wings. They have Brown, they have Watson, Flacco coming back this year. Hopefully they bring him back on a deal. I think he'll be a pretty good contributor there as well. And with Pickett, like, I know, like a lot of the Denver media is pretty high on him. For me, like I just don't see the value in playing him in minutes where it's like, he's not going to be a fit with Jokic, and it's like, what's really the point of that? Because
Hmm.
Jokic is going to play 40 minutes in a playoff game, right? So it's like, is he really going to play like the 8 other minutes and be effective there? I just think maybe for me, I guess pre-draft as well as the sample, I was a bit lower on him being a contributor for the Nuggets, and I just think kind of like unathletic point guards who are, not really versatile enough, don't fit really in next to Murray, especially. And I think with Jokic as well, I just don't think it's really that optimal of a fit. But Tyson, I'll kind of give him a little bit more leeway, in that aspect. But I just don't think those guys, especially getting the guaranteed deals that they got, Booth obviously showed a belief in them. I think that it's tough that he really did believe in them, and then Malone obviously had his reasons for not playing them, which I'm in agreement with Malone. I
Hmm.
know a lot of people were like, "Why didn't they play?" and whatever. And it's just like the amount of young guys you could have is tough as well. So, I'd give last year's draft an incomplete for now. I think next year is going to be pretty telling as far as Strawther's outcome, and we'll see if Pickett or Tyson are even on the roster next year.
Yeah, with Calvin Booth, like he's talked about redundancy, and I don't know if he means that exclusively with the starters because a lot of his draft picks have redundant skills, like you're saying with CB and PWA. And I feel like that draft, he was
Right.
just trying to get one of them. Like we need some defensive like contributor who's going to come and rebound and whatever and be aggressive. And he hit on CB and he might hit on PY. Like, he's showing progress. The others, it's like the shotgun strategy where he's like, I'm just going to pick a bunch, sign them all. I don't, we may need them in the playoffs, so I'm going to give them these deals. And it was just
Right.
like, I just none of them kind of hit in the way that Christian hit. So it was kind of unfortunate. And so now we have all these young players, and I think a lot of Nuggets fans want to like rebalance the scales of like some veterans and young guys. So I know you don't believe in Hunter and Pickett coming back. So you really do foresee that we're going to be moving on from young guys and kind of like leaning into trying to get like vet minimum dudes as well as maybe a draft pick or two.
Yeah, I think that's the direction I would go if I was in Booth's shoes. I think like even with Tyson and Pickett, like signing them to a two-way deal would have been more optimal last year, because if you sign like other guys in the vet minimum or the non-guaranteed, I think that'd give you more of a chance at least to like test it out and see if those
Right.
guys could contribute. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
if you even look at the Timberwolves series, like I see a lot of people like trade Mike and blow up the roster and everything like that, and it's like they were up 20 points in a game 7, and unfortunately the rosters we saw had a lot of limitations with the bench as far as versatility was concerned, and obviously Murray as well wasn't playing his best self. But like if you had, I said this
That is
today,
an
if Flacco,
understatement, sir.
yeah, definitely.
About Jamal.
My opinion was if Flacco was healthy, the Nuggets win that game 7. I really do,
Yeah.
because he's a playable guy. He could shoot the ball, and he's different from Gordon and Watson as far as their skill set is concerned. You could play 5 out with Blacko. I know we're getting a little off track there, but yeah, with Tyson and Pickett, I would personally, we'll probably talk about it with the draft guys coming up. I personally am higher on guys in this class
Mm.
than them, so I would either like attach them as a pick, like to get off Zeke's deal if you can, or like move up in the draft or try to get another prospect or two. So it stinks because it's a 1 year sample and they barely played, but the Nuggets are in a tight window now where
Yeah.
with the second apron restrictions and you're seeing what how they flame down the playoffs, you kind of need to go all in at this point.
So actually related to you're talking about using like either Pickett or Tyson as sort of a pick being attached to move off of a contract like Zeke's. We talked with Samora about the recent Jim Rome appearance that Malone had, or recent. It was probably a few weeks ago now. And it was very openly suggested by Malone that the Nuggets might trade the 28th overall pick in some kind of deal to get a win now player or vet. If you could steel man it for us, what is the best argument for trading the pick? And what type of deal could you see realistically happening involving the pick?
Yeah, I think with trading the pick would probably be if Holmes off the board, because he's probably like the number one target that I think would be really good for Denver. If he's off the board, I'd probably consider trading it. And then for who, I'd have to like look to see who else it would be. Like maybe a Clarkson
Mhm.
potentially need some more offense off the bench.
Yeah, I was gonna say when you were
Um,
listing your hits and you listed Clarkson, I was like,
yeah, yeah.
there's a path I could see, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, Clarkson I think would be another one. I'm kind of curious. What do you guys think as far as like who could they realistically get if they trade their first rounder? And this first rounder is not in a good class, so I don't know how much value it realistically has if you're going to trade it.
So that's my thing with it, is that when I first heard the idea, I thought, okay, I'm not opposed to potentially trading the first round pick, even though I had some like ideas of players that I would like the Nuggets to take at that point, because we are in this like win now window, right? But like you say, it's a 28th pick, it's a late first rounder in a draft that is already kind of perceived as bad, and the teams that are staying in it kind of have like their guys that they want already. So I don't know what kind of value that could actually fetch that would be worth giving up. Let's say that like if Holmes is available, and we're gonna talk about some of the actual favorite draft picks at those positions. But for example, Deron Holmes, if he's available, I'd rather have him than sort of reduced value basically by giving the pick away to try to move off a bad contract or
Hmm.
finagle some kind of trade, especially because of where the Nuggets are at with their salary cap situation. And so the other component of this, right, is that Malone goes on this show and he's pretty explicit about putting this idea out there. Like Malone knows what he's doing. He's very media savvy, and it almost felt like he had just gotten out of a meeting with Cal and Josh and said, what am I going to do to try to get what I want? Not that putting pressure on them via external media is like working, but he's very like aware of his image, Malone is, and it's something that I kind of appreciate about him because his persona is fun, right? But I do
Hmm.
think that this particular instance revealed it was just another symptom of the tension between our head coach and our general manager. How much of the you talked about some of the blame pie earlier. How much blame would you assign to Calvin versus Malone for how the season ended?
Yeah, I think you could. I think there's a lot of blame to go around. I don't think it's only on one person. I think Bucci definitely deserves some of the blame because I think he overloaded the roster with too many young guys, and also too he put young guys on the roster that the skill sets didn't really help, with the bench. And I think too, if you look at what Booth did, he overloaded the roster. Like I said, with too many young guys, not enough veteran guys, and the Nuggets just weren't. Their bench didn't have problem solvers, is what I kind of framed it as in my article. They didn't have guys who, if you look at their bench last year, right, a Bruce, a Jeff, even Vlatko was healthy, right? Like he was pretty good as well. Bruce was a problem solver as a guy. He was better than what the Nuggets could probably realistically get now at this point. But even just like trying to like replicate the skill set a little bit, the Nuggets just didn't do that. They had too many redundant guys on the bench. Reggie was not playable next to Murray. There was just so many kind of like ways the bench failed,
We
going
had
into
like
the playoffs.
redundancy in like the bad ways and not in like the good
Yeah,
ways.
right, exactly, exactly. And I think too with Malone, I think we could blame him. Another thing I wrote in my article as well was that he only played if you look at it, right, Christian Brown as being as like the quote unquote sixth man, he only played like 25 minutes in place of KCP on the whole year last year with the four other starters. And I think the problem with Malone is he wasn't able to solve the non-starter like minutes with the five starters. Like he wasn't able to put like a Brown or a Watson in with the starters and say, hey, KCP doesn't have it, in the playoffs. Let's sub in a Christian and see how he does. And I think Malone he couldn't find other lineups other than the starters. And I think that was a big problem because he clearly didn't trust the youth on the bench in the regular season and then going to the playoffs as well.
Even
So
enough to
I
play
think
with the starters, but part of that's because of,
exactly.
like you're saying, how he likes to run his lineups during the regular season.
Exactly. And I think, in that aspect of like four starters, one bench guy, he didn't really do that at all. If you look at Strawther and Watson and Brown, like those guys really like rarely played with like as one guy in with the four starters last year. And then two with Malone, like he played too many bench lineups as well. Like he played like five bench guys at a time, four bench guys at a
Yeah.
time, and I think he kind of like ran the starters into the ground. So I mean, I think Booth deserves definitely blame. I think Malone deserves blame. Probably when, and I'm a staunch Malone defender. I know a lot of people. Some people over the years just have not been like his biggest supporter. But I think Malone's a great coach. But yeah, I definitely assign some blame to him. And then you know Murray, I think Jokic probably gets a little bit of the blame as well, even though he's a lot of people from Nuggets Twitter and the media, are immune to giving Jokic blame, but I'll give him some blame as well. You look at the three ball that he had this year, just was like not good at all. I think some of the
He
defense in
kept
the Wolves
going
series
to
was not
it, was
good.
my thing, was like,
Yeah,
"You're not making that shot, create a better one." Oh my gosh. Yeah.
definitely. And he's such a large burden as well, where it's like tough to really blame him. But him being the best player and him being like an all-time talent, I do have to kind of hold him responsible a little bit. So I think there's a lot of blame to go around. It's definitely not
Yeah.
not just on
It's a
one
lot.
guy.
And it's so crazy because we were up 20 in a game 7, but everyone has some claim to take in the situation.
It
Yep.
would take a collective failure to blow a 20-point lead in a game
Right.
7. Yeah, like we talked about Tim Connelly with his draft history, but we didn't talk about he hired Mike Malone, which he's been a great coach for us.
True. Yep.
It's one of the reasons why maybe there's some smoke with this Malone Calvin Booth kind of differing of opinion, where a lot of GMs want to hire the coach that they're working with, or they have a
Right.
specific vision. Are you at all like concerned about how Booth and Malone are getting along, or do you feel like they can reconcile this?
Yeah, I think it's I don't think it's anything too serious. I mean, I think probably a little bit of just philosophy differences. Malone obviously leans toward veteran guys, which I think is a valid concern, especially at this point. Um, but I think Malone has played young guys, when they're actually like deserving of the minutes. Like he played Watson a lot this year. Brown played it like 70 something games or so in his rookie year, considering he had like a pretty veteran heavy bench at that point. And he even played Strawther a lot this year as well. So I think Malone was like open to the strategy, but I do think at times he did like bury the starters. But yeah, no,
There's
I
kind of
don't
like
think
a
that.
regression to like your default when things kind of get shaky. And that happens to be
Yeah,
what his default is, but it's not like he was never willing at any point to go out of that. Like you said with Julian, like he was glowing about Julian. I genuinely think if not for that injury, like Julian had a shot to be
yeah,
potentially getting even like tiny bits of playoff minutes just because of how willing Malone was to go to him in the
mhm.
regular season during the initial stretch when he was healthy.
Yeah, no, and even Malone drew up a ton of plays for Julian as well. Like you look at out of timeout plays, he was always drawing up stuff for him, and yeah, I'm not really too concerned about it. I do know Booth has like a year left on his deal, so depending on how it goes this year, I mean, there's probably a chance that he's not back. He did win a championship with them, so I'd be surprised if they don't re up. But um, I will say, if it comes to it, to choose between Booth or Malone, I'm staunchly choosing Malone, just to kind of just be honest there. But hopefully it doesn't come to that, and
Hmm.
hopefully they could win the championship this year, and it all
Can't
goes
just
away.
win.
But
Yeah,
Winning
yeah,
cures
yeah,
all ills, right?
yep, that's it.
yeah.
Winning cures everything. So.
I know like Calvin Booth has made some comments about this, but do you think that there are specific things that the team should look for in the draft as opposed to things like trades, looking on say the veteran minimum market, potentially on the mid-level market? And just basically, like, are there types of players that it's, easier to find in the draft as opposed to those other areas? And obviously, sometimes it's just harder to find something in the draft. So if you
Right.
could just comment on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's another great question because Booth and I think it was the Ringer article where he basically had said that's obviously a highly controversial article,
Yeah.
but it had a lot of
Highly
gems in there though. I
controversial
will
interview.
say it had a lot of gems
I
in
don't
there.
think he was
Yeah.
trying to be controversial either. He just like doesn't have a filter.
Yeah, that's probably part of it. But Booth in that article, he basically said like we're at the point where we have a belief in our starting lineup, right? We have to find skill sets, other ways other than the veteran minimum market, and that's through the draft. And that's how we got Christian, right? And Peyton. I think those are two really good illustrations as like to his thinking. Schrader could be that as well, eventually as a bench shooter. And I think Schrader has more to his game than that. But it's tough because I'm in favor of Denver signing two veteran guys to supplant the rookies in the or the young guys in the rotation. Definitely a backup point guard for sure. They need a guy who could play beside Murray, who's like a veteran type, in my opinion. Whether that's like a Chris Dunn or a Dylan Wright or Javon Carter, like somebody like that that's experienced and can play with Murray and without him. And I think too a bench big, Goga Batadze has been like the pretty trending name on Twitter for them, and they just need a guy who like is an innings eater for Jokic. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where it's like he's not running to the ground, and you don't have to play him in the playoffs even, right? It's just you need him to soak the minutes up when Jokic is either resting or just to like give him another couple minutes off the bench to breathe. So I do think that the draft could act as a way to add depth to what the Nuggets need. It's like a third string option, or even like a semi backup. You know what I mean? You play Goga one night, you could play. I'm sure we'll get to him Holmes another night, right? I think it's possible to have that kind of versatility. I just think the Nuggets need to get more versatile off the bench, to need more problem solvers off the bench compared to last year. So I think they could find that in the draft and on the free agent market as well. I just think that Booth has to strike that right balance instead of going into one direction that he did last year, where he went fully into the draft and kind of like
Mm,
downplayed free agency. I think he has to
yeah.
go strike that balance between the two.
So, speaking on this year's draft in particular, I will say that after following the draft for like the first time in my life last year, it felt very wing heavy. We had
Mhm.
Julian, the Heat had Jaime Jaquez, the Orlando Magic got Jet Howard, and the Thunder got Case. There were lots and lots of great wings. Obviously, in addition to Victor Wembanyama, who was the number one overall pick, who was a
Right.
big. But it does feel to me like this year's draft is very big heavy in comparison to last year. Do you think that the Nuggets should take the risk that it seems like when everyone talks about like, oh my God, drafting a big in the first round? Do you think that we should maybe do that in an effort to find Zeke's successor?
Yes, I do. I've actually been like anti drafting a big in the first round.
Hmm.
Like back then when they drafted Zeke, I was like
Mhm.
I was kind of in disbelief that he did that Connelly drafted him because I just think if you have Jokic on the team, right, like you just know that the backup big is only going to play a limited amount of minutes. But I do think in this draft, if you do draft any of the bigs that are available, right, if you look at a Holmes or Filipowski, those guys have the opportunity and the versatility to play next to Jokic. And I think, obviously Zeke at this point is just like he can't play with anyone. But, if you look at the draft, like I do think that there are options, right, that could play next to Jokic. So I've been more open to the idea of drafting a big in the first round. Because if you look at it, like Gordon was obviously like tired by the end of the year because he had to play like bench big minutes because
Yeah.
there was no Blacko. DeAndre is like, on the tail end of his career, and
Yeah.
Zeke was unplayable, right? So I think
A
that they
great locker
need.
room guy.
Yeah, great locker room guy, but and he filled in sometimes pretty well. But the thought of him playing backup minutes on a nightly basis is definitely out the window at this point. So I do think that if the Nuggets choose, they could get a big in the first round. You can kind of add to the young guy kind of wave as well. But also too, they wouldn't interfere in the skill set that's already on the roster, right? That's like a gaping hole that the Nuggets have. So I would be open to it. If a Holmes is there or Filipowski is there, I'd be open to them being the pick.
As you probably noticed if you're watching on YouTube, our outfits have completely changed, and so has the lighting. We had some technical issues with the film last night, but CT was gracious enough to come and re-record our film session portion where we're talking about the main prospects that he is most inclined for the Nuggets to choose in the draft next week.
What were you kind of seeing in these clips and why you were keyed in on Duran?
Definitely. I think with Duran is that he's pretty screen versatile. So in a lot of these clips, he's switching on to quicker guards and staying with them, and he's showing pretty good help as well. And here he's in the pick and roll, and now he's switching on to a guard. And the thing I like about Duran is that he's pretty composed in one-on-one situations, and he's not a guy who really gets too jumpy, on closeouts or a lot of players kind of like to, really like move around. But and then two here, like in the post, Dane ran like a pro style offense. Anthony Grant was a coach in OKC, as their assistant. And then he moved to Alabama, and I was head coach in Dayton, and he really runs like a pro style offense. A lot of post hub work for Duran. So if you see here, like, in the post, he was double teamed at times, and he made quick decisions. Really good plays on the move as well. And like his ability to score inside out is something that I really like. Like even here, like attacking off the dribble and a pick and pop, and he's able to take the big off the dribble. And I think that just speaks to his versatility. And like even right here, catching a pick and pop and then just two dribble attack, to the rim. So I think that shows just his all around kind of offensive arsenal.
Well, if you could just go back to that clip, I think he's in the green uniform. He's in the post a couple possessions back this one. So what I really liked here, if you go back to the beginning of this possession, you can just play it. He actually he goes into the post, he reposts, and then he forces the shooter's defender to react to him before he gets his teammate the ball again to just get him optimal space and time to set up his shot. It wasn't just about waiting for the double team. He kind of forced it with that dribble too. And I really, really appreciated that about him.
How is he like scoring right out of the post? Like if he had to just like take somebody, is it like quick footwork that he's doing, or is he powering through?
Yeah, no, he's got quick footwork. So he's pretty good at some up fakes, and he's got a really quick spin move as well. Like he'll dribble once to his right hand and then spin left. He's kind of like able to like throw the defender off from what I've seen a couple times as well. So he's definitely got a bag in the post. He's not like the strongest player, I would say, at 6'10", but he's pretty quick. So I think that's a factor there. He's able to kind of out quick slower footed bigs, especially too. I think in the post is where he could thrive too. But the fact that he's also a perimeter big, I think, speaks to some of his versatility there, and his ability to play inside out is I think an important development step for him.
Yeah, and he looks very like quick with his reads and decisions.
Yes.
We were talking about that last time too.
Yes. Yeah, definitely is a big too. I think you guys see Jokic, of course. Like we're spoiled there, but he's
so spoiled. No one can really stack up
the quick decisions. But I think as we see, even in the playoffs now, right? You see like a guy like Derek Lively and even Porzingis, I think for the most part, is a pretty quick decision maker. Yeah. He's in the paint, and Al Horford as well. You need bigs who are quick decision makers, whether that's in the short roll, whether that's in the post, whether that's in pick and roll as well. And I think Dayron, especially here, if we kind of roll the clip here, like he's attacking like from half court.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's from that far.
Yeah, and I think that, like I said, that kind of speaks to his versatility. Like even like here, this is a great play right here. If you want to freeze it right there, so he sets it up right where it's a fake DHO, and then he spins back to attack the paint. And then if
here he goes.
Ball, yep, then he goes right there. Really sick dunk.
Even
and
here,
it's funny because I remember someone. Oh, sorry. Well,
no, it's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I remember someone mentioning about him because he's just one of the favorites for all of draft Twitter that he can run inverted pick and roll, but it's not like he's high volume at that. But whenever I see him do it, he just looks so comfortable. So he's like versatile enough that even in situations that he's not in often, he just looks and moves very comfortably in a bunch of different positions. So he might not be like an A plus in any one thing, but he definitely stands out as somebody that is like at least a B minus at a lot of different offensive situations. And I think that's particularly valuable on a team like ours.
Yeah, that was a good one right there, where he ran like an inverted pick and roll, and then you see like the defense kind of mix the switch, and then he's able to
They both try to
attack.
like recover
It's just
back.
like, yeah,
Yeah, it's
that
just
was
so
so
tough
cool.
as a big in playing like as the guard defender like in screens, because bigs are usually guarding the pick and roll, right? So it's like if you're guarding it the opposite way, and we see that with Jokic when he's kind of running it sometimes as well. It's pretty tough for bigs to guard that kind of action. So yeah, I think like Ray said, it's I would say he's not like A plus in anything, which is fine, but he does have a lot of different skills, especially as a big, that I think are important. Especially when it comes to being like a bench big for Denver, but too, I think he can play with Jokic as well. And defensively, I think he's scheme versatile. We saw him block shots and switches, and he could play in a drop coverage. He could play in a hedge. And I think he's pretty quick enough to slide his feet, and he's got that 7'1" wingspan as well. So, and then we saw him
Yeah.
shooting this year at 39% from three on 3 attempts a game, which isn't like the most attempts, but for a big, I think that's pretty good. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think just the
Agree.
overall theme with him is just the versatility on both sides of the floor, and I think he'd be a useful piece to whether it's a contending team or even a rebuilding team as well.
No, but we want him to come to us.
I
The
agree.
last thing
I agree.
I'll just say I really encourage our viewers, our listeners, if you're interested in learning more about this prospect, there's a bunch of these sessions where they'll like No Ceilings especially did a lot of these film sessions where they bring the player in to break down their own film. And something that really stood out to me when it came to Duran was just how when he's breaking down his own film, lots of players are very smart, especially multi-year college basketball players, but his basketball IQ stands out among the bigs in that the way that he breaks down his film and what's going on in the possession, what he saw in a certain possession, either offensively or defensively, to make him react a certain way, sounded a lot more like point guards in the class and less so like some of the other bigs in the class. So I really appreciated that and what that could bring to our offense, which is a very like read and react heavy type of offense. So
Definitely, yeah, those were very insightful and informative. With the film session, so definitely great for people to check those out.
it's really easy once you come to the Nuggets if you do know the fundamentals of basketball. So that's why I feel so good about him as a prospect. But I know a lot of other teams feel really good, or I would say like fans of other teams feel really good about him as a prospect too. So we don't know that he'll necessarily fall to the Nuggets on draft night, right?
Yeah, I think at 28 it might be tough because he did get a green room invite, so I'm a little concerned that he won't be there. Yeah, no, I think Duran would be fantastic for Denver. I really do. I think he could play right away too, which would be an added benefit, compared to last year where the players were a little bit, hit or miss at times. So, and he feels a need, in the front court, as the bench big, but he could play with Jokic too. I think at times, you know what I mean, against the Wolves, right? You could play him in two big lineups, and I think that's what Nuggets were missing this year. And Holmes can stretch the floor. Not to say Gordon, obviously, he has a little bit of, offensively sometimes he can't space as well. But I think Holmes gives you that option where you can play five out and you could maintain that size level as well.
Who did I know you had someone else as your plan B for if Durant does not fall to the Nuggets at 28, but we still want a big there. It was Kyle Filipowski, right?
Yeah, so it's Filipowski. Yeah, I think with the Nuggets need versatility off the bench when it comes to their front court. I think Holmes would be, he'd be 1A. I think Flip as well. He's another guy who was invited to the green room, but maybe he could slip. I'm not too sure, but I think with Flip's game, he's a guy who could play inside out again. 35% from three this year on 3 attempts a game. So again, not too big of a sample, but I do think that he's capable of punishing defenses there. Really good passer, could attack closeouts. 7-footer. He's pretty physical as well. And he played the four last year with Lively on the roster. So this year kind of
Oh,
transition.
that's right, because Lively's a Dookie.
Yeah. And then
Forgot
Filipowski was
about that.
able to transition more to play the five this year. So he didn't really have like a bigger rim protector next to him, which I think that's where Duke kind of lacked in that aspect. But I think he's pretty passable defensively. I think he'd probably be best in like a blitz or a hedge where Jokic plays instead of
Hmm.
like drop big. Um, but again, I think if you kind of surround him with versatile defenders, like if you have a Watson or a Brown, an AG, for example, right? I think that could be workable.
He is measured at actual 7 feet, though. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yep. I don't
Okay.
feel used. I think he's like 250 pounds around there. So
Yeah, yeah.
pretty physical. But yeah, I like a lot of his passing as well. Like you could play him in the post as a post hub, and he could play off the move as well as we see there.
Yeah,
Um,
that was
and
a good pass in this clip. Like just
that's the
And then here's the
really,
passing it
passing, yeah.
over. Yeah.
really nice pass. The thing with Flip is he's a really quick decision maker, which you need in the front court. Like I think him and Vlatko in the front court, passing wise, would be really solid.
Mm, I can see
Vlatko's
that.
a really quick decision maker. Keeps the ball moving. Good screener as well. And I think Flip is somebody like that. He'd be pretty good too.
Whoa, got
Yeah,
some
he's got some
jabs.
acceleration upside as well there. This is kind of like a bailout shot at the end, but he does have some ability to put the ball on the deck. And like this is awesome here too, like a fake handoff and then attacks the paint like one dribble.
Yeah, that
Uh,
was nice.
It would be nice to have
That's
somebody off the bench who isn't, like, scared of bailout shots. That isn't like Reggie or Justin who, you know, I still appreciate everything those guys gave us this season.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think with Holmes and Flip, like those guys are uh, bigs of the Nuggets just haven't had since Cousins. I think as far as looking at their versatility offensively.
Mhm.
So it's either I think the Nuggets need like a dynamic rim roller, and then they could play him with like a point guard who can kind of like carve up the defense. But I do like Flip and Holmes because they could also play as lob threats as well. But they could also create their own offense where you could kind of mimic how Jokic, obviously not how Jokic plays,
Right.
one on one, but at least can mimic some of that style where you could run some offense through them and they could hit cutters. They could make quick reads and decisions out of the post. Both guys could play in the pick and pop as well, which is important. So, I think those guys off the bench would be pretty dynamic. And I think with Flip, some of the defensive concerns he has would be kind of less mitigated with the bench. And also, too, if you look at the personnel there as well, if you have a Blanco next to him, Watson, the Brown, you have pretty good wing defenders.
Yeah.
So that could kind of
And
account for his
I
weakness.
was just gonna say, like, you hinted at all these ways that, the bench could play more like the starters do with kind of a Jokic light at that center position offensively, but I think defensively as well, like you say,
Right.
if we have someone who is capable of, like, playing at the level and having the other guys not completely switch the scheme that they're using defensively when Jokic is on the floor versus off, I think has some value to it just in terms of getting everybody in that rhythm as well.
For sure. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think too when you look at it, right, I think the bench is just like a really drastic change from the starters, like on offense and defense. I do like that the Nuggets.
What offense?
Yeah, I mean the offense is really just Murray, pray that he makes the shot. Um, but I do think that you can kind of mimic, what the starters do as far as playing at the level of the screen and, like I said, like playing more through their big men offensively as well. I do like that the bench is able to switch 1 through 4 for the most part.
Yeah.
Especially when Bruce was on the team last year, that was kind of, they tried it with Reggie, but he wasn't able to hold up in some matchups. So I think next year you can kind of maybe try to do that as well because I like having that versatility, right? Where the Nuggets aren't just like a one kind of trick pony where they can play only at the level.
Sure.
They have
Yeah.
multiple pieces you could deploy. So I think those guys would be great additions to the Nuggets if they were picked there.
How do you feel about the guards in this draft? And if you had to give like your top 3 or 4 guard prospects, who would that be and who are you looking at?
Okay, I think for the Nuggets would probably be a guy who's slipping as of late is Isaiah Collier, and I don't
Yeah, I
I
was
don't know
gonna ask
why.
about him. Yeah.
Yeah, I have Collier top 5 on my board, my personal big board. I'm just really that high on him. The context of USC was not good at all. Not a lot of floor spacing for him.
But he played with
Went
Bronny James,
the
LeBron's son. Wasn't that enough?
the future Laker, Bronny James. Yeah, with Collier, I think for me, like what I really like about him is that he's like a walking paint touch. Like he could get to the rim at will, um, draw the defense in. He's a really good passer. I think at times he had a lot of turnovers, but I think that's just because of the usage that he had at USC, and I think he won't have that in the NBA. He's going to play beside other creators and other good bigs as well too. So I think the turnovers will scale back there. The three ball is a bit off this year, 33%, which isn't like the worst in the world, but it's not great. And I think he's like 6'3", 6'4", so he's not like on the taller side, but I do like the physicality that he plays with, and he's very, very quick, like in the pick and roll. And um, I think in particular with Denver, like playing him beside Murray, he could attack, second side actions, could attack off the catch, and also too, he could run the bench. Playing him with the big, whether it's like a lob threat veteran or a Holmes as well. So he'd probably be like my number one guard prospect. Like if he were to fall all the way to 28, or if the Nuggets traded up a little bit. Then my next guy is Tristan Newton out of UConn.
With Newton to start, he had 4 triple doubles in his college career, UConn, which was the most as a power conference player since Shaq. So, which is a pretty like staggering stat when you look at Newton, where he's 6'5" guard. He's not a big man, right? And I think Shaq had 6 in his career, and then he's tied with John Morant, Jason Kidd, and David Robinson for 4 triple doubles all time, which is a pretty impressive statistic. And I think with Newton, he played in a pretty modern offense. Dan Hurley obviously was the coach rumored for the Lakers job, and I think it's pretty easy to see why, considering how high powered the offense was at UConn, and a lot of the modern concepts that he used in college is not really seen in college. It's college is a lot more of it is a lot of structured offense, but I think UConn did apply that with having a lot more modern principles as well. And I think it's important that Newton was able to be kind of like the key cog in all of UConn's back-to-back championships as the point guard. I think being a point guard for a unit like that is a pretty difficult ask, and I think he really excelled in that aspect. 15 points a game, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 80% from the line. I think the 3-pointer shot like 33% from 3, which I'm not really too worried about because he shot 37% the year before. So,
and he's taking those deep threes like we saw a couple clips ago, right? Like basically NBA threes.
Definitely. I think too, like you see Kling get the board and Newton just fires away. He's got like a really great confidence about him shooting deep.
I like this lob that is coming up too. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. The thing with Newton as well is he's a really good really good at placing lobs. Whether that was to Klingon or this was Samson Johnson.
Yeah, getting that over Edie is impressive.
For sure.
I didn't think Edie's placement was too bad, but his teammate there did get Tristan's teammate did get behind him, but you still had to get it over those fingertips of Edie, who was very large.
For sure. And you see, Newton, he's really adept at running off of ball screens. UConn played multiple ball handlers in their offense with Cam Spencer, and Stephon Castle was a guy who's going to be a lottery pick as well. He was more of a wingish type player, but he was initiating offense at times, and I think it kind of speaks to Newton's versatility, where he's running off stagger screens, and now he's throwing a lob for the big man, and he kind of was carving up Edie in that championship game toward the end of that kind of run there to kind of break the game away. So.
The Purdue guards, though, I was complaining about the point of attack defense from Purdue that entire game.
Yeah.
They were getting eaten alive by UConn's guards.
It would be nice to
manage there for sure.
It'd be nice to have like an off ball, not that like that's his whole game, but just if Murray is playing with another guard or something like that. If he could do some off ball stuff, that would be really nice, because we haven't really seen that with Murray in a bit.
Yeah. I will say, though, like you're talking about these triple doubles, I think that kind of thing would really appeal to Cal, because we did hear a lot about the fact that Jalen Pickett was like the first Penn State men's basketball player to have a triple double since Cal went to Penn State, however many decades ago. And he's mentioned before sort of wanting do-it-all players, and especially like the rebounding would certainly appeal to him as well, because everybody on the floor has to do all of the things, especially rebounding. That's very big. But you talked about how Newton was like the engine of this pro style offense at UConn. Kind of makes sense why the Lakers wanted Dan Hurley to come and fix the mess over there. Oh, wait. Yeah. Will, could you replay this pass? This was really cool.
Yeah, I kind of clipped this the other day, as I think it's one of the better passes that I've seen during the 2024 draft cycle. There was a pass that our friends in Serbia would like too. Nikola Djuricic in the combine, he had a nice pass as well.
Yeah.
This one from Newton, like if you kind of freeze that, Will, right there, like look at Newton here. So he takes 2 to the ball, right? And then you kind of see the backline defense is, Spencer lifts up to the top of the key and Klingen's rolling to the rim. And Newton's able to kind of manipulate the defense with a no-look pass to Klingen for the poster slam, which I think this was, an excellent read, but also too just a really cool pass as well.
This was so good. Can we actually not give Klingon to Trae Young now that I'm thinking about it?
Hey, at least
Actually, there's like balancing that with like, no, just send Klingon to the East.
Yep.
This conference is full.
That's a really fun, combination there. But yeah, I think with Newton, if you want to go back to the clips a little bit, like maybe toward the end, there was like another play I wanted to highlight a couple of this is another one too, like just see the relocation for Newton, where I think the appeal would be playing with Murray off the ball. Newton can initiate offense, but too, he could run off the screens as well and play beside Murray. So I think that's the appeal there, where he can run the bench unit by himself, and he could also play beside Murray, and Douglas wouldn't be defensively compromised either.
Right. Was there a specific clip you wanted to go back to?
There was like a pick and roll with him and Castle. I think I wanted. I think it's a little further down, but that was also another great play there too, like attacking ED 1-on-1 in the paint. Like, look at that to get over him, and then he did the too small gesture to him after he hit that bucket, which was pretty funny. Yeah, those were, I think those were the 2 good ones as well with the lobs. Trying to basically take advantage of, Edie kind of playing in no man's land there. And I think Newton was like, his lob placement was really good. I think he's a 3-level scorer, deep shot maker.
I just love his finishing at the rim.
Yeah.
He's like the way that he attacks, like he doesn't have
60% finisher at the rim this year. Last year, I think he was 51%. So he did improve that there. Oh, there it is. So this is like, if you see this, like kind of like a horn set, Caravan kind of clears the side. And then Hurley was really good at, putting his players in position to succeed. So if you see Castle here was a guy who teams really left open. So this is a nice play here where Castle's screening for Newton in a ball screen action. And then there's kind of like a dummy action see off the side there with Samson Johnson. So, and if you want to go back a little bit, Will, right there, you could just see like Newton, like the way he's able to position his body to kind of throw off the defense to throw this pass to Castle, like over his head right there too. And then, because that's how much, the defense respected him after he was hitting those deep threes. Now he's able to hit Castle on a like a 3-on-2 situation here, and he's able to finish at the rim. So just another like really nice read that I think that I saw from Newton. I just think he, just to like be like simplified, I just think he knows how to play, the game. So I think that's just going to be important, especially like we said, him running a high-powered offense. And just to be transparent, I think he'd be better like fit than Pickett on the roster. So I think you kind of play right away in that aspect. And the versatility, I think, would also be a big help to Denver's bench. And you could play him alongside Murray as well. And you wouldn't be defensively challenged there.
So you have a first-round grade on him. I haven't seen Newton really mocked anywhere above like high 30s.
Yeah, no, I think with Newton, a lot of it is that he's 23 already. So he is an older player for the class. And I think GMs are just like really always drawn to youth.
But he's already good. You don't have to worry about him getting better.
I agree. And we were in this Twitter space last night with a couple of the draft Twitter guys, and my good friend Chucking Darts, he has a podcast as well. He has Newton, like I think he has Newton higher than me, honestly, on his board. But like I think just Newton being a guy like on like the best offense in college basketball, like being the point guard engine for that, being a back-to-back national champion as the starting point guard, like I just think that speaks volumes. I think the 3-point percentage was a bit down this year, so that might be a reasoning, for them being lower on him. But
apparently, none of the guards in this class can shoot, by the way. So like, I don't know why that would be. I don't know why that would be the issue.
Drafting a national champion worked for us before. So hopefully he brings that.
True. We need another one because it didn't work this year. Let's see. We need to replenish the national champion stock. National champion stock. Okay, so before we kind of wrap up the looking ahead to draft night next week, I wanted to just comment a little bit about this new dynamic where the draft is going to be on 2 nights, with the first round on Wednesday and the second round actually not Wednesday or Thursday night, but like midday on Thursday. Do you see any way that this could change the dynamic for the types of like trades that happen on draft night, like from the front office and like general manager's perspective? Like, for example, do you think there's more urgency on night 2 for, say, if the Nuggets want to move up from 56 to try to get Newton earlier? Because I
Right.
like highly doubt that he falls that far, given that he's worked out for like half of the teams in the NBA, and other teams that want to move up in that second round, as opposed to like, before it would be first round and then second round, and there's not much time to be like, everyone's just kind of scrambling and it's all maybe blended into one. Um, how do you see this as being any different for the teams that are trying to make moves?
Yeah, I think it gives teams more time to evaluate, especially like it's not like that much more time, but it's not like a
I mean, it's
rush
a
where it's
whole
like,
extra day relative to what they
yeah,
had before.
yep. So it is definitely more time. Because the first round and the second round was like back to back, on one night, and I think now teams are gonna have more kind of optionality. I think too, there's gonna be more discussion with agents as far as like, is this guy willing to be drafted or not, or is he willing to be
Mm.
undrafted? Because if you remember back with in the Reeves draft, Reeves and his uh, agency at the time, like basically elected to
I'm
go
drafted.
undrafted to go to the
Yeah.
Lakers, which was an optimal landing spot for him, and a lot of players have done that in the past as well. But I do think that probably will give more communication for teams to be willing to do that. So I think trade up opportunities as well. I think that's going to be something that's going to be more like possible at this point. I think just
Mhm.
because there's more time to kind of gauge that. So yeah, I do think that they'll probably be more thinking as to like, will they use the pick? Will they not? Will they trade up? And also too, like discussion with agencies regarding if their player is willing to get drafted or not. Probably be a big factor there as well.
We're gonna have you back on to have a reaction to it, which we really appreciate. But before we move into some fun little games on the show, any final thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think the draft, just a general kind of draft thought, is it's probably like one of the worst since like 2013, at the top at least. It's pretty interesting today. I saw that Alex Saul is going number 2 to the Wizards, where I think that's a great pick. I have him personally number 1 on my personal board. So I think the top of the draft is going to be pretty interesting because who's
Mm.
going to go number 1? Is it Reese Shea, which is I think won't be a great pick. Klingon at number 1, I think possibly could be a pretty good pick, especially pairing him with Trae Young. That'd be an interesting fit, I think. Um, but I think this draft, at the top obviously has been kind of slandered, but I like the role player depth in this class, and
Mhm.
I think it should be a fun night. I always like the draft, so I think seeing trades that are made, and that's like usually like the unofficial start of the off season for me. Like the draft first, and then moving on to free agency. So should be a fun night. But yeah, the draft overall is more depth, but the top obviously has some lacking star power there.
Oh man, sorry, I know we're going a little long or whatever, but I have to get this question in, Grace. Did you? Because I don't think I saw your opinion on the Bankero versus Chet. Because
Oh
Oh
it was
yeah.
kind
my
of
gosh, this is one of our OG
it was
arguments
kind of
on
unclear,
Twitter.
like, because just you talking about the
I
uncertainty
completely
at the
forgot
top.
about
Yeah, the uncertainty at the top, it's kind of similar. It was like, well, I didn't know who was who, and it was like the reports are going back and forth, and the odds were shifting all throughout as it was leading up to that draft. Like, did you like that pick for the Magic, like picking Paolo instead of Chet, or are
I
you
did.
having any second thoughts on that now that you've seen them play like entire seasons?
No, actually, on my board at that time, I had Paolo number 1.
Okay.
I had Chet 2. So they were back to back, and I know Grace is a Magic fan, right? So Paolo for me, I would rank him over Chet even now, just because I think Paolo is able to absorb creation usage, and he's able to be like a number 1-ish guy on the team right now. And I think he probably still has a ways to go. The shooting obviously has to get better. Some of the defense maybe too, but Chet was like a second cog, maybe even a third if you count
Hmm.
Jalen Williams in front of him at times,
Mhm.
and I think he went to a really optimal spot. But I do think Chet's like a really good player, but I value Paolo more because I think he's able to absorb more usage. And if you put Chet as a number 1 guy, I don't think it'd go as smoothly. And
Yeah.
Paolo led the Magic, with friends as well, and they had a pretty good surrounding roster.
He was
To
electric in the playoffs in a way I did not expect because boy is that boy inefficient in the regular season. But he led the
yeah,
playoffs in like mid-range shooting on like ridiculous volume. He was shooting like 56% from mid-range, trying to
no, it
will
was
them
very.
past the Cavs. It was crazy.
I was impressed with Paolo, and especially he led them to a top 5 seed as well. I think as a second year player, um, is pretty encouraging. I think so. Yeah, I would still rank Paolo above Chet, but I don't know if that's is that controversial for you guys?
No,
I
no, no.
I
Like
was
we
I
I
was
mean,
just joking around earlier in the season that I was so mad that the Thunder were like possibly going to be this 1 seed and they ended up in the 1 seed. Not like Chet was the driving force. They had SGA and like a lot of things were working well for the Thunder, but I was like really pissed at the Magic for letting Chet go to the Thunder just because I'm a West dude. But I guess if Paolo went to the West, it would maybe be worse. So
and the Thunder would be,
Yeah,
like,
not true.
girthier in their front court, although they wouldn't have, like, the rim protector that Chet is or the shooter that Chet is, so it would just be a different kinda thing. They'd probably still be looking for their center because 'cause they'd wanna play Paolo at 4 just like the Magic do. Or not because they play like 5 out. I appreciate your, bringing that argument up actually, Will, 'cause I do think
mhm.
that we ended up coming to a consensus there
Yeah,
where I was
we
basically
did.
saying the same thing that CT did, where I'm like, I feel like Paolo has more of that, like, upside where you're talking about that create scaling up the creation usage, more so than I see that for Chet. But then we both ended up in the place where we're like, well, maybe just J-Dub is the best of all 3 of them,
Yeah, J
actually.
Dub is
So,
insane.
what
That's really
like,
what
these
did
2
it.
trying to figure that out. J-Dub is out here just, like, being a star.
Yeah.
I'd still
Um,
take Paolo.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
it,
kinda
it
think
seems
the
like it.
same.
Yeah, I was just behind on the Palo thing. I'm not a Magic fan like Grace. All right, let's go back to the current Nuggets and the starters, and let's talk about some quick off-season questions.
Not related to the draft.
Yeah, not related to the draft. Just talking about who's on the team already and what might happen with that. Let's start with your thoughts on KCP. I believe that you are one who would say the Nuggets should keep him. What are your thoughts with KCP? Like, there's been some news. Some journalists are feeling like he's on his way out.
Right.
What are you thinking right now?
Yeah, no, I some of the commentary I've seen on Twitter has been infuriating with like just let him go and you know don't go into the second apron. And I think with KCP, there's more benefits to signing him than letting him go, because you're releasing like an asset for nothing, basically, right?
Yeah,
And you could look at it like that the Nuggets basically traded. It was a fleecing, the trade originally. But now, like, if you let KCP go, and I'm a like, there's no bigger Christian Brown advocate than me. But I think as far as playoff equity, I think KCP is still a great player. And I personally would hope that he returns. I think it's worth it because even if KCP is, as a lot of people have said, is quote unquote declining, you could still trade him on his deal, right, a year into it or 2 years into it, despite it being like in a balloon kind of situation. So I would bring him back. Hopefully, I would go into the second apron for it, despite the limitations. So
yeah,
yeah, I'm team sign KCP. I think he's too important to what the Nuggets do. Even though I think Brown is starting at the 2 would be interesting. And I think in the regular season, I think it wouldn't be that much of a drop off. But I think as far as the playoffs are concerned, I think there would be some slippage there.
yeah. I also thought about like he's talked about how he doesn't want to relocate too much. Like he's been traded a little bit already, and he
Right.
didn't really like that he got even traded to the Nuggets at first. I feel like he has to know that wherever he signs, there's the possibility he's going to be traded, whether
I
it's
mean, look at what
Nuggets or
happened to
another team.
Bruce.
Yeah, like it
Now
just
he's in Canada and
his
about to move
contract.
somewhere else.
Yeah, his contracts just kind of necessitate that. And you'd think that the Nuggets having like goodwill with them, he may have more say in like, well, I don't know. The Nuggets are going to do what they're going to do because Jokic is on the team. So maybe he's
Right.
just worried about no matter where he ends up. But I hope we definitely keep him.
Mhm.
All right. Next question. We definitely miss Bruce in the Wolves series. We're struggling to find more options outside of Jamal to create and handle the ball. Should the Nuggets focus on a veteran being another ball handler for the team?
Yes. I actually would sign a veteran point guard and draft one as well. So I would sign like either Chris Dunn. I think would be a great fit, even though I think the shooting is not great, but I think he improved that this year. In Utah, and either that him or Dylan Wright. somebody like that. They need a veteran ball handler who allows Murray to play off the ball. And it's even like the player doesn't even have to be like, just to, like, simplify it, doesn't have to be all that great. They just have to provide that skill set of you can play Murray off the ball. And this player can play without him a little bit off the bench and also play in place of Murray with Jokic, right? I think that's like two kind of key components to like filling out that guard backcourt spot. And Reggie was able to play with Jokic, but it wasn't great at the point of attack defensively, and then he couldn't play with Murray. So like the Nuggets really were like kind of hamstrung there. So definitely need to like flip the skill set there. So I would sign a veteran point guard, whether it's a Dunn, Javon Carter via the trade, or like a Clarkson, somebody like that, or Delon Wright. So I would sign a vet PG. I would also draft one as well, and yeah, I'd ideal pick it, but
Yeah.
that's what I would do for now. I would
Yeah.
definitely sign one and then draft one as well, whether it's a Newton or AJ Mitchell or somebody like that, as like a third string guard.
Yeah, I agree with your point, like that you said earlier about Pickett, where people have talked about how if he's going to come in and play, that it's going to take a lot of like adaptation from those who are around him. And it's like almost like the opposite, where you have Jokic as a center doing the point, and then the bench is going to come in and they're playing with like his style of ball. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
really skeptical of it too. But speaking of the bench, please tell me you have good news. Will Zeke Najee be on the roster by the preseason?
This is like CT Stradamus. I don't know if he has the news.
You have the answer.
I'm pretty bad at predicting stuff to come right, so hopefully this one's right. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a way you can bring him back, and that's just from a pure on-court perspective. Just his skill set is just not what the Nuggets need. You can't play with Jokic, and also too, like him being the sole big is just not something. Him being a switch big, I feel like is not.
Ugh.
It maybe also is not entirely true, but even the premise of that is not very integral to what the Nuggets do. So I think they need either like a rim roller or they need a floor spacer, right? So if you get like a Goga or even like
Mhm.
at the worst a Daniel Tice, I think,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
play for the Nuggets,
Yeah.
right? Like
I
even
keep
at the
forgetting
worst, I
about him.
think. Yeah, like I think he's definitely gonna get a minimum Tice. You know what I mean? I don't think he's gonna get higher than that. Like I
Yeah.
would definitely sign a Goga Tice. Drummond, I think, is probably out of their price range, unfortunately. I would really like Drummond for them. But then if you like kind of like look at it from that way, right? You could either sign a Goga or a Tice, or you could draft a Dayron or a Filipowski, right? And you get like the best of both worlds, where the center is a rim roller, but also too like if you draft one, they're floor spacers. So it's an entirely different skill set than what Zeke currently provides. So I don't think you could bring him back. I think from a salary perspective, it's tough as well. I mean, I'm not entirely like up to date with the second apron stuff. I know, Grace, you and Will as well. You've both been tweeting kind of about it. I need to learn more about it, but I think also just getting off of his deal would be beneficial for the Nuggets in the short
Mhm.
term and probably the long term as well. And also you'd upgrade a rotation spot. So yeah, I mean, do I think he's gonna be back? I mean, I don't. I would think not. But you can never put it past Calvin Booth to see what he does. So
Yeah, I think I would be so shocked if they went on the Zeke reform path. It's just so clear, like you said, the skill
This
set.
is
We
not
need the
what we
rim
tried
rolling
this
or the
year.
spacing, and he just
yeah,
doesn't have that. It's so obvious. So
Yeah.
we'll see, though.
you
It's
have to
just
find
like
a team to take
yeah,
him though.
that's
Yeah.
the thing.
Just
It's just
find
like
a
a
team.
just a little tricky front office
That was
maneuvering.
the other thing I didn't even mention about the Giddy trade is that Giddy requested the trade. No, Sam Presti's words in the announcement were that he demanded the trade. The Thunder didn't have to give up draft capital to give him to the Bulls for Alex Caruso. Like,
Bench
so
players talk like starters.
I mean, there's a sucker born every day. We need to we need to get on finding these guys so we can improve our roster. All right. So my next question, it's another prediction question. It's very specific. Will Jamal Murray sign a max extension this summer? So there's two parts to it, right? The team would have to offer it and Jamal would have to accept it.
I'm gonna say no.
Where
I
do
think
you
he
see
might
the
wait.
breakdown in that chain of events?
Well, I think like if you look at it last year, right? He held out entirely because he thought there was a chance he could make the All NBA team, right?
Just like
Um,
sitting around waiting for it to happen, I guess.
like that seemed to me like that was his thinking because then he didn't sign it and he thought he could get more money and I think more years maybe if I'm not mistaken. But
Yeah.
I think at this point, like Is he going to sign the extension this summer? I'm not entirely sure. I think Murray likes being in Denver because of Jokic, of course, I think is a main driver of that. And I think Malone too. And, obviously he's had a lot of signature moments in with the Nuggets and winning the championship and whatnot. But I don't know. I just have a feeling he's going to hold off until free agency for some reason. I don't know. I hope he signs the extension. A lot of people are down on Murray, but I still believe in him. Even though I think there should be some reformation to his game and some adapting, to say the least. But I do have that belief that
Some
he's, you know,
training, some
yeah,
conditioning.
I still believe in him as a player and as a key, cog for the Nuggets. So, but is he going to sign the extension? I think he holds off until the summer. I don't
That's
know why, but
interesting.
I
So
just think
does
that's going to be the
Samora.
case.
I really thought
Yeah,
more people would agree with me on this, but maybe it's more I'm thinking from the perspective of if I was his agent, I'd be urging him to sign it this summer because you don't know what kind of mindset the front office is going to be in next year. Say if you had another year like this one, and if it's like, well, I don't think we want to offer the max anymore right now, especially when you see like how they're being all hand wringy about barely going into the second apron to keep KCP. I mean, barely is like the same thing because the penalty's the same regardless of how far you are into the second apron, but will definitely be there after Jamal's extension. So, if he does choose to, wait and try to make all NBA, could he actually like play like it? Because even when he was not injured, I won't say healthy, but not injured during the regular season, I wouldn't say that he was like playing any differently than he normally does in the regular season, which like isn't terrible, but it's nowhere near what you would think like an all NBA player or someone who's trying to make all NBA is, playing at. So it's like, yeah, he's competitive and he wants to try to go for it, but it's like, do you think it's just gonna fall into your lap? Like, what's the process here?
right.
Our last rapid fire question has been kind of medium fire. Can you name 3 players that the Nuggets should absolutely target on the vet minimum market, regardless of the KCP situation?
Yes, Chris Dunn, Goga Batadze. Trying to see who else would be on a vet minimum that's like would work. Like even if Goga doesn't they don't sign him, Daniel Tice, I would sign him as like a backup big. They just need anyone at this point that could that could play. Those two for sure, Dunn and Goga. Like sign me up for them right now. If they're Nuggets by the summertime, I think we're going back to back. I really do.
I love it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Off-season optimism.
Yep.
All right, awesome. Now we're gonna do something fun to, squeeze every last bit of your time, and we really appreciate it. But we're talking about the Nuggets bench, right? That's what this is all about. We have our starters for the most part, especially if KCP stays. So we're gonna do a snake draft of the Nuggets ideal bench. All right, cool. Give me TJ McConnell.
Wow.
Always my first overall pick.
I will pick, oh my God, Bogdanovich.
Good. Okay. Bogdan. Bogey.
The player that they want to trade for MPJ.
No.
All right,
Um,
CT.
does Monk qualify? Can I put
Yes, he
Malik
does
Monk on there?
qualify.
Okay.
So Malik Monk.
Let's get all offense going.
Yeah, dude, let's cook.
Let's go psycho at the bench. Let's put Mo Wagner on there.
Oh my gosh. Why do you guys always take my centers? That was definitely going to be my guy. I
Dang.
love a
Monk
psycho bench.
Monk and Wagner would definitely fight off the bench, I think.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, Will.
Portis?
It's a
Okay.
good pick.
Okay, give me Naz Reid.
Nas, solid.
Who do I go with next? Okay, give me Peyton Watson.
Gotta take a nugget.
Yeah, he's I think he's just like a great bench player for our team, even right now with his limited skills. Like, let's hear it. All right, Will.
I guess I'll go with Clarkson.
Okay.
Give us some luck. Maybe he'll come to us.
Yep. I'll go Miles McBride.
Deuce. Great POA. And isn't afraid when he gets the ball, something I really appreciate, which is good. He can bring the ball up the floor. He's not like, you're not going to like let him go like ISO too often, but he can attack some guys in transition. He can hit a spot up 3. Can even like hit like a little step back midi sometimes too.
I'll take Kyle Anderson.
Whoa, slow mo.
Okay. Interesting versatility. I guess you have a lot of offense anyway, so he'll give you some versatility. He could let you play a little big by playing.
Yep.
I'm gonna go with CB.
There we go.
Now who's pandering?
I need a pandering pick for sure. I couldn't think of anyone. CB.
Oh man, I better win this vote. I need some offense, but I just love like frantic energy. So give me Isaiah Jackson, and then I'll take. Oh my gosh, I think I need shooting now. You know what? I'll take Isaiah Joe.
It's a good pick.
Okay, then I'm gonna go with Olynyk.
That's
It's a good pick. Yeah. I'll take actually this guy actually forgot to include in my draft hit segment. Dean Wade.
Just a solid stretch four, just knows how to play
Dean Wade.
basketball.
Yep.
The Cavs actually look like a coherent basketball team when he's on the floor.
All right, that's the draft.
That's our ideal Nuggets bench. Well, you went with like Bobby Portis over Naz Reid, so
yeah, I totally
that was
blanked
an L.
that.
You just gotta take that one. Well, thank you, CT, so much for giving us all of your time. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate your insights leading up to the draft next week. Our doubleheader with CT, we're going to actually review the draft night after the draft, talk about what the Nuggets actually did, what maybe some other teams did, and how it affected maybe our ability to get De'Ron Holmes. We're going to see. And then the week after that is the moratorium period, the dreaded moratorium period, when all of the deals that will become official during free agency are really being hashed out between teams. And hopefully by then we have some idea of what the actual numbers are that are being offered to KCP, because ironically, through all of the speculation this past week, we don't know what other teams are actually offering to KCP. We can only speculate that it's more than whatever the Nuggets are willing to offer. So when we find out that it's actually a reasonable number and Denver is still being weird, we can start, waving our fists at the Cronkies. Thanks, everyone. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, and hit the notification bell. Comment below who you think had the best ideal Nuggets bench. And also let us know who you guys are looking out for in the draft. You can leave us a review on Amazon Music and Spotify as well. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.
True.